Hi guys, I'm Ash and this is F1 Fanatics. So I am here with our race reaction to the Singapore Grand Prix, which has just finished and we've just had the podium going. Well, it was an interesting race to say the least in terms of the battles, in terms of the strategy. On-track battles, not so much. It wasn't a key overtaking track. It was more what the strategists could do on the pit wall, but we will get to that in a bit. Let's start off with the grid itself. So, Daniel Ricciardo was disqualified from qualifying yesterday, and this was due to an issue with his MGUK unit. So, it was actually providing him with more power than it should have. It was only a spike, and Cyril Abiteboul actually has come out and said that it was for less than a millisecond in which he actually got this boost. However, it is one of those where it was decided it was a black and white decision. It did happen, and therefore he was disqualified from qualifying, which meant that he started in 20th. For him, the only benefit was that he was able to have a free choice of tyre, but he would have preferred to be starting further up the grid, especially on a track where overtaking is not the easiest. Also on the grid was Charles Leclerc. So he was in his grid box and Ferrari started it up, and there was an issue with the starting up process. Was quickly rectified. The car just didn't sound right as it started, and there were a few concerns that there was going to be an issue. However, they didn't prevail, and Charles Leclerc was able to start the race and finish it with no problems at all in terms of reliability, which is something we like to see. As race fans, we don't like to see them being decided because of an issue with reliability rather than driver performance itself. So, starting grid, in terms of the tyres, it was quite simple. It was almost a mirror image, really. It was 1 to 9 being on the soft tyres. Pierre Gasly took an alternate strategy and was starting on the hard tyres in 10th, and then 11th to 20th were all starting on the mediums, which meant that we were able to start off the race with a very good prospect of what was going to happen indeed. The first lap itself was mainly based on the fact that everyone got away well. First and second corners, not too many issues. Charles Leclerc was immense off the line and got away fantastically, leading to Hamilton and Vettel actually being the ones that were battling for position for second and third. They did settle down into their grid order, really, and it went away quite smoothly. The one big collision that occurred on the first lap was between Carlos Sainz and Nico Hülkenberg. So going into turn 5, Nico Hülkenberg went for a gap that was closing quite quickly in terms of Carlos Sainz taking his natural racing line on the track, and ended up going into the back of him, which led to Carlos Sainz having a puncture and Nico Hülkenberg suffering damage to his front wing. It did affect both of their races in terms of Carlos Sainz ended up being over a lap down because of having to get back to the pits, and also his change, and also the fact that he then had damage to his car that was having to be managed for the rest of the race. Nico Hülkenberg had to go round and ended up having his front wing changed. Did lead to him having a bit of a 50-50 race, really. Both of them would have been hoping for really big points finishes, but neither were able to get massive amounts of points. Nico Hülkenberg did manage to recover up to 9th, so that was 2 championship points for him, but Carlos Sainz ended up being just outside the points at the end of the race. In the first stint, the driver to actually watch was Daniel Ricciardo. He was looking very punchy, was wanting to make moves, and over the radio he actually turned around to his team and said, "We're not here to hang about," and was going for moves left, right and centre. His best moves really were on the racing points, pretty much carbon copies of each other, practiced with Sergio Perez, then followed it up with Lance Stroll, which was really good to see, and also had a fantastic move on Daniel Kvyat as well. So he was actually making really good progress through what really should have been considered as traffic for him, because the Renault was definitely out of position. At the front, we were having more of a tactical battle than anything else, and for the first stint, really, the first 6 cars, and that being Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, Valtteri Bottas and then Alexander Albon, stayed stations really. They started there, that's where they were. The gaps were closing up and then building again, and it was just really a concertina. There wasn't really any out and out moves, and that was because they were driving at a pace that allowed them to extend their first stint to try and avoid falling back into the traffic of those that were going longer in the race, knowing that overtaking is not the easiest. And at one point, there was actually a stage when Sergio Perez and Daniel Kvyat were trading fastest laps, and they were going so much faster than the guys at the front. But that was all about to change when the first round of pit stops actually occurred. So the first person to jump the gun and to actually go in for a pit stop was Sebastian Vettel. So he went in for his pit stop on lap number 19, and that did mean that Max Verstappen, who was a couple of seconds behind him at this stage, was able to follow him into the pits. They both were okay pit stops, and nothing spectacular and nothing went wrong with them. And they both came out. Following lap, Charles Leclerc pitted, and this was where there's now going to be a bit of a power struggle at Ferrari. So Sebastian Vettel pitted first and actually performed the undercut on his teammate. So Charles Leclerc came out of the pits behind Sebastian Vettel, and he wasn't happy about it, and he made his feelings known on the team radio that he wasn't happy that Sebastian Vettel had been given first choice for pit stop, and also the fact that he was out in front and there was no team orders for that position to be changed. But that was obviously something that then came later into the race. At this stage, Hamilton stayed out for quite a few laps longer actually, and one thing to put out there is it's now the 142nd race in which Lewis Hamilton has led a Grand Prix, which has equalled the record held by Michael Schumacher. So it's something that he will be looking to extend and will be aiming to have that out and out record himself. But both Mercedes went longer than the Ferraris on their first stint. And at the time, I was watching the race and I did think it was a questionable one. It didn't really seem as if there was much to be gained from it unless there was a safety car. And at this stage, there wasn't any indication that there would be, because everyone was driving really well and was being very controlled in the manner of their driving. Where there were overtakes, there wasn't any real squabbles in terms of that. It was quite easy manoeuvres being made. But Valtteri Bottas was the first Mercedes to make his pit stop, and he came in on lap 22. Came out of the pits, was out for a few laps, and he got a message over team radio. "We need you to drive slower," was effectively what the message was. He was going too fast, which meant that he would end up performing the undercut on Lewis Hamilton. And Mercedes decided that's not what they wanted. So slowed him down. He then was holding up Albon, and Hamilton was able to make his pit stop on lap 27. He came out of that and he was behind both Ferraris and Max Verstappen in terms of the actual race lead. He did have other cars in front of him that were for traffic, but they were obviously going to be making pit stops and he was going to get past those. It was a weird strategy call, to say the least. There was always the potential that the tyres could come back to him, in the fact that the Ferraris and Verstappen had been out that little bit longer on them, but it wasn't to be. And in the end, it just was the wrong call for Hamilton to stay out. He should have come in with Leclerc. Yes, he wouldn't have got closer to Leclerc by doing that and would have been behind Sebastian Vettel, but it would have meant he was up with the lead drivers and not having to chase from behind, which is how the race ended up being for him. So we're then in a situation where all of the lead drivers are coming through traffic, and in terms of the performance of them, Vettel got through the traffic really well, and I would say did drive fantastically. I wouldn't necessarily have given him driver of the day. I think that was something that was more for the fact that he got the race win, but the race win was more on a strategy side of things, and I think there were other drivers that did perform better than Vettel today in terms of their results, but there were a couple of then clumsy moves within that. So Daniel Ricciardo tried to overtake Giovinazzi, didn't work out for him, got a bit of oversteer in the corner itself when Giovinazzi really had the racing line. Ricciardo got puncture and Giovinazzi had damage to his front wing, which meant both of their races were slightly affected by this. I would have expected both of them actually to have gained quite good points, really, based on how they were performing at that point. We didn't have a safety car till quite late in the race, actually, and it was caused by Romain Grosjean. Now, yes, it was George Russell's car that actually caused the safety car, but the safety car was caused by Romain Grosjean not knowing when to back out of a move. Now, yes, the Williams is a lot slower than all of the other cars on the grid, including the Haas, but Romain Grosjean tried to make a move around the outside and continued to try and make that move even when the gap was closed. He then tagged the back of George Russell, who ended up in the wall and has now had the first retirement of a Williams this season and also his first retirement in F1. So it was an unlucky day for him, but that safety car came out, and from then on, the race was just broken up into green flag and safety car periods, which I feel ruined the race slightly, because it did mean that we didn't have that continual battle, and it would have been really good to have seen how Leclerc faced Vettel in terms of trying to overtake, how far Hamilton actually could have progressed in terms of being able to overtake and get onto the podium. So we ended up having 3 safety cars. We had one for Sergio Perez having an engine issue where the team actually radioed him and said, we need you to stop the car. And then we had the final safety car for a move by Kvyat on Kimi Raikkonen. I'm still not 100% decided on whose fault I think it is. I'm leaning towards Kvyat at this moment in time, and I'm sure Mike would agree with me on that. He did make a really late move, and Raikkonen actually was turning into the corner as he came through. Raikkonen ended up retiring, and Kvyat was just dropped back really from that moment in time. So on the whole, not a great move. I would say, as I said, think it's more Kvyat's fault than Raikkonen's, but I'm still not 100% on that, and I probably need to see it a couple more times before I make a final decision on that. So as I said, the race was ruined slightly by the 3 safety car periods, meaning that we weren't able to get a consistent battle throughout. It meant that the race did finish as it was at the safety car period. So Sebastian Vettel got his first race win of the season, Charles Leclerc continued his good form since the summer break, getting another podium and finishing second. So that is 2 race wins and a second place in the 3 races since the summer break, with Max Verstappen coming third and the final step on the podium. Lewis Hamilton was in 4th, and despite that, once again, he has increased his lead in the Drivers' Championship, which is one of those where, at the moment, Valtteri Bottas is the closest competitor to him, so as long as he beats Bottas, that is going to extend. But Charles Leclerc is making gains now. We thought it would be Max Verstappen, but considering how the Ferrari was this weekend, there is the potential now that we have got 3 cars that have the ability to compete for the rest of the season. So it's going to be interesting to see how the season actually finishes. Notable performances, I'm going to say Antonio Giovinazzi had a fantastic race and deserves to have got higher than his 10th place finish. Lando Norris finishing best of the rest, so in 7th. Really good performance from him. Once again, he was really in a race of his own. It was not really too much of a challenge for him in terms of battling with other drivers. Pierre Gasly made the his strategy work really well and gained a couple of places from his starting position, which was good to see. And even though he finished outside the points, I'm going to say Carlos Sainz had a very good recovery drive in terms of dropping to being a lap behind. And yes, the safety cars did help him, but he did end up finishing 12th. So a really good finish for him there. Couple of stats for the race itself. So we had Kevin Magnussen once again getting the fastest lap. So he got the fastest lap last year and actually has the race record in Singapore. Once again, got the fastest lap this week. So no one got a point for fastest lap this race. First race win for Sebastian Vettel this season, which is good for him. He needed a confidence booster, and he's definitely got that today. First time Ferrari have won 3 races in a row since 2008, so that's going a long way back, and it's actually the last time they won the Constructors' title. And also, the first time we have had a 1-2 in Singapore. So Ferrari have got their own piece of F1 history today. They've got quite a few bits of F1 history, so it's probably not one of those that's going to stand out for them, but it is good to say that they've got the first one. For me, really, the one thing I've got to say is that this season now is shaping up nicely. We are going to have some really good battles at the front of the grid, so it's going to be one to look forward to. Guys, make sure you enjoy the rest of your race weekend. Mike and I will be back later in the week so that we can do our full review of the race itself, and we will also be doing our preview for Russia next week. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so that our videos are going into your YouTube inbox so that you're able to access them as soon as you see them. Or even better, you can press the bell icon and that will give you a notification as to when one of our videos goes live, and you'll be able to see what we are talking about this time. But guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend and I will see you later in the week.